Well, the playing of Amazing Grace kicking off 4th of July festivities in Wichita today. Saturday morning, a commemoration of Independence Day was held at the American Revolution Memorial at Wichita's Veterans Park. Veterans from multiple generations came out to the event, which featured a 3-volley salute and the playing of taps. The chairman of the Veterans Memorial Park says America reaching its 250th birthday symbolizes the sacrifice patriots made when declaring independence.
They knew that if the British won, their lives would be short. The British were going to come after them. And that kind of sacrifice, most people today don't even understand what that meant. I mean, it's everything.
The guest speaker at today's event was John Medea, a retired Air Force colonel who flew B-52 bombers, transport planes, and reconnaissance planes.